Alright, longswords. First off, budget range. This is a new maker on Cult of Athena, Balaur Arms. From what I've heard, they aspire toward Albion quality while being a lot cheaper because they're made in India. Now, I can't verify that because I have not handled any of these before, but looking at them, I'm definitely impressed by what I'm seeing, just going by the pictures. Now keep in mind they're unsharpened, so you have to get either the sharpening service or do it yourself. What I very much like to see is the Albion style handle wrap here. So it looks very similar. You have the risers, you have the leather wrap over top, and then the marks from the string wrap to hold it in place while the glue settles. So this is looking very, very interesting and promising. Also based on the measurements, seems great. It's just where it's supposed to be, everything seems to line up. So I want to tentatively recommend them, and I say tentatively because as I said, I haven't tested them myself yet. I don't know anyone who has, but you know, at this price, $200 US, 225 Canadian, for something that looks this good and is made of 5160 high carbon steel and peened full tang, hard not to recommend it, or at least suggest looking at it, you know? Here's one that I've heard too many HEMA practitioners recommend as a budget cutter. Do not include it in the list. The cold steel hand and a half sword, $225 US. There's also this version here for 300. I don't know which one is better. I think this is the one that people normally recommend. I'm not as sure about the other one. And so yeah, this is used quite a bit, even at cutting tournaments. So if you don't have a whole lot of money to throw at an Albion, say, then this is still a good choice. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind always with cold steel is they have a reputation for dodgy quality control. I've seen it many times myself. I've seen it mentioned in reviews. I've even seen Cult of Athena pointed out. You never know exactly what you're getting. It can be a bit of a gamble, but I've seen plenty of people who have had good luck with it and who don't have any complaints about the sword. Ronin also has a budget longsword. I reviewed the Euro Model 2. This one here, in my opinion, looks better. Should be just as good as the other one, if not better. 1075 high carbon steel. The edge is okay. I would prefer if it was sharper, but I was able to cut tatami with it without having to sharpen it. So that's good. Peen construction. The grip wrap doesn't compare to the Albion style. I mean, this price, not really surprising, but it works. No real complaints here, and yeah, that's a good choice. Ronin also has something for the mid-range. This is the war sword. So basically very similar to the Principe or Principe, except with a different pommel. It's got the same wide blade, strongly tapering blade, based on the find from the Alexandria arsenal. Based on my experience with the other Ronin swords, I don't have any reason to believe that this is not going to be good. You know, same steel, same construction. Looks quite good. In fact, I think I prefer the handle a little bit on this. That looks pretty promising, the overall shape. And yeah, with this humongously wide blade that you've seen before, unless this is not sharp enough, I would expect this to do very well. In fact, even with the edge that I'm used to from Ronin, I think this would still cut quite well, because it's not just about the sharpness at the apex, it's also about the blade profile and the way this tapers and gets really thin toward the edges. It's one hell of a cutter. But personally, I would advise being careful with this type of blade against hard targets. No particular reason. Here's a great mid-range option. In fact, this was my first eye-opening whoa sword. The Squire line bastard sword from Albion. This is $540 US, 690 Canadian. This is when it clicked. This is when I realized, oh, this is what swords are supposed to feel like. Because that was the first time I handled a sword that blew me away with how light and well balanced it is and how lively it feels in the hand. So again, these are unsharpened by default. You have to add sharpening service if you want. And yeah, I used to do cutting with that before I even really knew how to do cutting properly, and it still did very well. And yeah, this is just a more affordable version of the Mercenary, I think. I mean, if you're looking for a longsword and this is your price range and you have the patience for it because it might take a year to receive it because they have a long backlog, go for it. Before I get to high-end longswords, I'm just gonna sneak in some arming swords. It's a different category, but this is what people often mistakenly call longsword. So Kingston Arms is a relatively new maker, and these are designed by Angus Trim. If you know anything about swords, you know that name means quality. Anything that man touches is good stuff. I have this fencing side sword from Kingston Arms. This is not an Angus Trim design, from what I understand. This is the blunt practice version. It's also a sharp version of this. And this I'm so far quite pleased with. I've done some sparring with it, and it has held up very well so far. It's well designed. The handling is great. And so going by this and looking at those and considering that those are designed by Angus Trim, I think these are going to be pretty badass. So yeah, this arming sword here, if you look at the grip there, very nicely done. So I quite like that, worth a try. In fact, I might get one of these at some point. This is a speculative recommendation. I have very good experiences with swords from traditional Filipino weapons, but the ones I've reviewed so far have been Filipino designs. This is quite a bit more expensive than the other ones I've tried. So I would assume that if anything, the quality on this one is potentially better. That's not always how it works, but looking at it, I definitely like what I see. So this is mid-range, upper mid-range, low high-end even, $715 US, 910 Canadian. The weight is pretty good. It weighs a little bit more than the Arms and Armor Claymore I used to have. It's slightly longer, also peen construction, and I do like the pictures. The way it's shaped, that looks very professional. Also remarkably professional finish here. The bluing looks great. In fact, I got my Claymore from Arms and Armor blued as well, and it looked pretty much just like this. I would not mind trying that out at some point, but it is a lot of money to put down. So this is why I say tentative recommendation or suggestion. Rather, I don't know for sure, but it's worth a look. Same with this one here. This doesn't cost quite as much, but it's also a higher price range than other swords I've had from TFW. And I do like this. This is some sweet design here. The way the handle is shaped, tight wrap there, and again, very precise machining here on these. I say machining, but they may very well be hand forged in the Philippines. I don't know for sure. Either way, it'll look quite promising. In fact, I almost ended up ordering this once. I was going to. I had it in my cart, along with other stuff, but then I ran out of money and, threw it back out of the cart. But I almost got it, and I might still. Also upper mid-range, low high-end, we've got the Valiant Armoury Signature Collection. And there are definitely some nice ones here. I reviewed the Valiant Armoury Brighton, which was the Craftsman Collection. So these are around $700 US, 890 Canadian. Definitely some nice work on these, and a scabbard is included in the price. So that's rare. I've seen a lot of reviews of Valiant Armoury swords. They have a good reputation. I can definitely recommend taking a look at those. All right, high-end Kingston Arms Angus Trim competition cutting sword. Already talked about Kingston Arms and a trim. It's quite an investment, but I know that Angus Trim swords are really good. I reviewed one Well, in fact, several. This looks like it's up to the usual standards of quality you can expect. Angus Trim swords generally come with very sharp edges, cut beautifully, handle extremely well, etc., etc. Nothing bad to say about this. Here we've got a classic. You see this thing everywhere in cutting competitions. Super popular for a good reason. The Albion Cressy. I've cut with it myself. In fact, I owned this before I gave it to Blood and Iron. The only thing I personally don't like so much about it, it's got a very short grip. This is really a hand-and-a-half sword. Can be used with one hand. With two hands, you have to really kind of squeeze them in there. If you have large hands, you have to hold the pommel. Otherwise, yeah, it cuts very well. In fact, much more so than you would think. This may be kind of an unassuming design if you look at it, but yeah, great cutter. And as usual, very durable. Upper high end, you know this beauty here. Lockwood SL1019B, Type XVIIIa, 15th century longsword. $1,800 US, $22.90 in Mapleland. So, yeah, what can I say? I've already declared this as to be my favorite longsword, not counting Kriegsmessers. And yeah, it's beautiful. It's not just beautiful, it's an amazing cutter. The bronze guard and pommel is really nice on this one. I think there's a version with steel guard and pommel as well. And extremely nice grip here, handles beautifully. You can see some use on it. And yeah, if you can afford it, by all means go for it, but that's a lot of cash. Also upper high end, basically anything made by Michael Tinker Pearce. I used to own the Renaissance longsword, which I really, really liked. That was a great cutter, very well shaped, complex hilt, beautiful sword. And yeah, generally from what I've seen so far, you can get your hands on a Tinker, just go for it if you can afford it. It's a no-brainer. What about the Messer and Falchion? Here's a budget option that I have not owned before, but I consider to be a safe bet based on my experience with Windlass so far, and also with the price here, it's hard to go wrong. This is a threaded pommel, so can be potentially weaker than peened, but on the upside, it's also easier to fix. And I do like the shape overall. I've seen positive reviews. In fact, the channel Medieval Review on YouTube, which I would recommend checking out, link down below, has taken a look at this one and he seems to like it. I mean, it has the typical problem of many windlass swords and swords in this price range in general, this ugly stitching here on the side that's not terribly well done, it's not sealed, that rubs on your hand uncomfortably. But I mean, for this price, there's going to be corners to be cut, and yeah, it is what it is. Another budget option is the Cold Steel Man-at-Arms Messer. A friend of mine has this, and I had a chance to cut with it as well, and this was a surprise because I was looking at this grip here, which looks very blocky, as you can see, and I was thinking, uh-oh, it's not going to be comfortable, is it? But they did bevel it. It's kind of hard to see, but it is beveled, and actually feels all right in the hand. And this thing is crazy light. Also cuts very well out of the box. So yeah, it's not super historically accurate, but it's well made and it cuts well, handles nicely. So worth considering. As far as messers are concerned, of course I have to mention Landsknecht Emporium. I've got the Falke, and gave you a first impression recently. They also have more affordable ones that would be mid-range, so mostly around 300 euros, which is 360 US dollars, 465 Canadian. Then you've got all the way up to 1100 euros, 1330 US dollars, 1700 Canadian. And yeah, so the Falke is quite good so far as I can tell. Haven't tested it yet, but I definitely like it based on my look so far. And the other one's definitely interesting. It's probably not going to be quite the same level of quality in terms of finish and material and whatnot. They have to cut the corners somewhere, right, to reach that price, but I would still be fairly confident that these are probably quite good. Alright, high-end, Drew material, the Albion Zeldat. This messer is beautiful. I've had a chance to cut with it once, with the Lee Smith's messer, and it's the single-handed equivalent to the Knecht, let's put it that way. It's just as good, very well shaped, extremely nice handle, cuts like an absolute mofo, and yeah, 1220 USD, 1550 CAD. That's a lot of money, but if you can afford it, oh boy. Of course, if I don't show the Knecht, people are gonna revolt, so obviously great high-end option. However, I'm not actually seeing this here. The thing is, I thought that this was sold out. If I look at it here, it seems as if you can still order it, but on the other hand, I can't find it here in the list. It's not under two-handed, it's not under hand-and-a-half swords, and it's not under single-edged either. So I honestly don't know for sure if it's available or not right now. I thought it wasn't. As a budget option, we have the Windlass 17th century Italian Rapier. This one really surprised me because Windlass has a reputation for making somewhat floppy rapiers, along with Hanwei as well. In general, budget price rapiers tend to have this problem of being overly flexible. This was no exception. However, it performed a lot better in some of the tests I've done than I would have expected. And it's very well shaped. Like in terms of handling and balance, it's great. It is quite a light rapier, good steel quality. The wire wrap on mine is perfectly tight, no issue with that. And yeah, for this price, based on this, some of the other windlass rapiers might actually be good too. Just as said, keep in mind that they are a little bit flexible. In fact, I've actually turned this one into a practice rapier since it came with an unsharpened blade anyway, and I just cut off the tip and put a rubber blunt on. Works fine. So I haven't had any issues with that in HEMA practice either. And that's it already. Unfortunately, I'm not really aware of any other budget priced rapiers that I know enough about or have direct experience with to be comfortable recommending. So on to the mid-range. Here we've got another Angus Trim design made by Kingston Arms. This cutlass here, which has basically a falchion blade with a more modern complex hilt put on it. So this is not a particularly historical design, this is more of an amalgamation, but clearly a very well designed one. Generally, as said, whenever Angus Trim is involved, it's good stuff, as a rule of thumb. So this one also has the typical very comfortable and effective handle, sharp edge. Call of Athena can also sharpen the swedge there on the back, which comes unsharpened by default. And yeah, even though I haven't handled this myself, just looking at it, I would definitely expect this to be good. In fact, I wouldn't mind trying this out at some point. Also mid-range, this is the Hanwei Basket Hilt backsword. I used to own this one. There's also a double-edged broadsword version. I happen to have the backsword, which is single-edged. Typical thing with Hanwei, doesn't come sharp enough, in my opinion. However, this one seems well made and solidly constructed. Now, despite the threaded pommel, threaded pommel isn't necessarily bad. If it's well done, there's no problem. If it's poorly done, it's a big problem. But in this case, I smacked a zombie head with this. Even though the edge wasn't good enough to cut deeply into it, it still, it took the impact, no problem. It has a stingray handle wrap underneath. It gives you a lot of grip. And yeah, it's pretty well done. Basket hilt swords, again, are not super easy to find, particularly well-made ones. And even though, like many others, I sold this one to regain funds, I did not regret buying it. It was quite a nice sword. Now, high-end, the Town Guard by Arms and Armor. This sword I owned and reviewed, and I really only sold it because I just can't afford to keep that much. It was a great one. I very much enjoyed this. Really well designed, great handling, much more substantial than a rapier, as you can see by the wider blade. Very interesting swept hilt, beautifully done, extremely tight wire wrap, unique finish. Sort of, I would call it extra satin finish, if you know what I mean. It's sort of grayish. And I don't think the pictures really do it justice. This looks great in person. And yeah, so the only drawback is it's a lot of money to spend. You know, 1,220 USD, 1,550 CAD. But it is worth it in my opinion. Here's a great high-end option, the Maximilian by Albion. Owned this one, reviewed it as well. Grudgingly sold it to finance my wisdom tooth extraction. Funny story. 1,650 US dollars, 2,100 Canadian. Ouch. But it's a humongous sword. It cuts very well. Well shaped, looks great. What more is there to say? If you like them big and you can take it, I mean, you can afford it, this one's for you.